The Malay Proas by James Fenimore Cooper. Reading from Great Pirate Stories by Joseph Louis French, as read to you by me, Mars. We had cleared the Straits of Sunda early in the morning, and had made a pretty fair run in the course of the day, though most of the time in thick weather. Just as the sun set, however, the horizon became clear, and we got a sight of two small sail, seemingly headed in toward the coast of Sumatra, proas by their rig and dimensions. They were so distant, and were so evidently steering for the land, that no one gave them much thought, or bestowed on them any particular attention. Proas in that quarter were usually distrusted by ships, it is true, but the sea is full of them, and far more are innocent than are guilty of any acts of violence. Then it became dark soon after these craft were seen, and night shut them in. An hour after the sun had set, the wind fell to a light air that was just kept steerage way on the ship. Fortunately, the John was not only fast, but she minded her helm as a light-footed girl turns in a lively dance. I never was in a better steering ship, most especially in moderate weather. Mr. Marble had the middle watch that night, and of course, I was on deck from midnight until 4 in the morning. It proved misty most of the watch, and for quite an hour we had a light drizzling rain. The ship the whole time was close-hauled, carrying royals, as everybody seemed to have made up his mind to a quiet night, one without any reefing or furling. Most of the watch were sleeping about the decks, or wherever they could get good quarters, and be least in the way. I do not know what kept me awake, for lads of my age are apt to get all the sleep they can, but I believe I was thinking of Clawbonny, and Grace, and Lucy. For the latter, excellent girl as she was, often crossed my mind in those days of youth and comparative innocence. Awake I was, and walking in the weather gangway in a sailor's trot. Mr. Marble, he, I do believe, was fairly snoozing on the hen coops, being, like the sails, as one might say, barely asleep. At that moment I heard a noise, one familiar to seamen, that of an oar falling in a boat. So completely was my mind bent on other and distant scenes that at first I felt no surprise, as if we were in a harbor surrounded by craft of various sizes, coming and going at all hours. But a second thought destroyed this illusion, and I looked eagerly about me. Directly on our weather bow, distant, perhaps, at cable's length, I saw a small sail, and I could distinguish it sufficiently well to perceive it was a proa. I sang out, "Sail ho! And close aboard!" Mr. Marble was on his feet in an instant. He afterward told me that when he opened his eyes, for he admitted this much to me in confidence, they fell directly on the stranger. He was too much of a seaman to require a second look in order to ascertain what was to be done. "Keep the ship away! Keep her broad off!" he called out to the man at the wheel. "Lay the yard square! Call all hands, one of you! Captain Robbins, Mr. Kite, bear a hand up! The bloody proas are aboard us!" The last part of this call was uttered in a loud voice, with the speaker's head down the companionway. It was heard plainly enough below, but scarcely at all on deck. In the meantime, everybody was in motion. It is amazing how soon sailors are wide awake when there is really anything to do. It appeared to me that all our people mustered on deck in less than a minute, most of them with nothing on but their shirts and trousers. The ship was nearly before the wind by the time I heard the captain's voice, and then Mr. Kite came bustling in among us forward, ordering most of the men to lay aft the braces, remaining himself on the forecastle, and keeping me with him to let go the sheets. On the forecastle, the strange sail was no longer visible, being now abaft the beam, but I could hear Mr. Marble swearing there were two of them, and that they must be the very chaps we had seen to leeward, standing in for the land at sunset. I also heard the captain calling out to the steward to bring him a powder horn. Immediately after, orders were given to let fly all our sheets forward, and then I perceived that they were wearing ship. Nothing saved us but the prompt order of Mr. Marble to keep the ship away, by which means, instead of moving toward the proas, we instantly began to move from them. Although they went 3 feet to our 2, this gave us a moment of breathing time. As our sheets were all flying forward and remained so for a few minutes, it gave me leisure to look about. I soon saw both proas, and glad enough was I to perceive that they had not approached materially nearer. Mr. Kite observed this also, and remarked that our movements had been so prompt as to take the rascals aback. He meant they did not exactly know where we were at, and had not kept away with us. At this instant, the captain and 5 or 6 of the oldest seamen began to cast loose all our starboard, or weather guns, 4 in all, and 6s. We had loaded these guns in the Straits of Banca with grape and canister, in readiness for just such pirates as were now coming down upon us. And nothing was wanting but the priming and a hot loggerhead. It seems 2 of the last had been ordered in the fire when we saw the Proas at sunset, and they were now in excellent condition for service, live coals being kept around them all night by command. I saw a cluster of men busy with the second gun from forward, and could distinguish the captain pointing to it. "There cannot well be any mistake, Mr. Marble," the captain observed, hesitating whether to fire or not. "Mistake? Lord, Captain Robbins, you might cannonade any of the islands astern for a week and never hurt an honest man. Let 'em have it, sir. I'll answer for it you do good." This settled the matter. The loggerhead was applied, and one of our 6s spoke out in a smart report. A breathless stillness succeeded. The Proas did not alter their course, but neared us fast. The captain leveled his night glass, and I heard him tell Kite in a low voice that they were full of men. The word was now passed to clear away all the guns and to open the arm chest, to come at the muskets and pistols. I heard the rattling of the boarding pikes, too, as they were cut adrift from the spanker boom, and fell upon the decks. All this sounded very ominous, and I began to think we should have a desperate engagement first, and then have all our throats cut afterward. I expected now to hear the guns discharged in quick succession, but they were got ready only, not fired. Kite went aft, and returned with 3 or 4 muskets and as many pikes. He gave the latter to those of the people who had nothing to do with the guns. By this time, the ship was on a wind, steering a good full, while the 2 Proas were just abeam and closing fast. The stillness that reigned on both sides was like that of death. The Proas, however, fell a little more astern, the result of their own maneuvering, out of all doubt, as they moved through the water much faster than the ship, seeming desirous of dropping into our wake, with the design of closing under our stern and avoiding our broadside. As this would never do, and the wind freshened so as to give us 4 or 5 knot way, a most fortunate circumstance for us, the captain determined to tack while he had room. The John behaved beautifully, and came round like a top. The Proas saw there was no time to lose, and attempted to close before we could fill again. And this they would have done with 99 ships in 100. The captain knew his vessel, however, and did not let her lose her way, making everything draw again as it might be by instinct. The Proas tacked too, and laying up much nearer to the wind than we did, appeared as if about to close on our lee bow. Question was now whether we could pass them or not before they got near enough to grapple. If the pirates got on board us, we were hopelessly gone. And everything depended on coolness and judgment. The captain behaved perfectly well in this critical instant, commanding a dead silence and the closest attention to his orders. I was too much interested at this moment to feel the concern that I might otherwise have experienced. On the forecastle, it appeared to us all that we should be boarded in a minute, for one of the Proas was actually within 100 feet, though losing her advantage a little by getting under the lee of our sails. Kite had ordered us to muster forward of the rigging to meet the expected leap with a discharge of muskets, and then to present our pikes, when I felt an arm thrown round my body and was turned inboard, while another person assumed my place. This was Neb, who had thus coolly thrust himself before me in order to meet the danger first. I felt vexed, even while touched with the fellow's attachment and self-devotion, but had no time to betray either feeling before the crews of the Proas gave a yell and discharged some 50 or 60 matchlocks at us. The air was full of bullets, but they all went over our heads. Not a soul on board the John was hurt. On our side, we gave the gentlemen the 4 6s, 2 at the nearest and 2 at the sternmost proa, which was still near a cable's length distant. As often happens, the one seemingly farthest from danger fared the worst. Our grape and canister had room to scatter, and I can at this distant day still hear the shrieks that arose from that craft. They were like the yells of fiends in anguish. The effect on that proa was instantaneous. Instead of keeping on after her consort, she wore short round on her heel and stood away in our wake, on the other tack, apparently to get out of the range of our fire. I doubt if we touched a man in the nearest proa. At any rate, no noise proceeded from her, and she came up under our bows fast. As every gun was discharged and there was not time to load them, all now depended on repelling the boarders. Part of our people mustered in the waist, where it was expected the proa would fall alongside, and part on the forecastle. Just as this distribution was made, the pirates cast their grapnel. It was admirably thrown, but caught only by a ratlin. I saw this, and was about to jump into the rigging to try what I could do to clear it, when Neb again went ahead of me, and cut the ratlin with his knife. This was just as the pirates had abandoned sails and oars, and had risen to haul up alongside. So sudden was the release that 20 of them fell over by their own efforts. In this state the ship passed ahead, all her canvas being full, leaving the proa motionless in her wake. In passing, however, the two vessels were so near that those aft in the John distinctly saw the swarthy faces of their enemies. We were no sooner clear of the proas than the order was given. "Ready about!" The helm was put down, and the ship came into the wind in a minute. As we came square with the two proas, all our larboard guns were given to them, and this ended the affair. I think the nearest of the rascals got it this time, for away she went, after her consort, both running off toward the islands. We made a little show of chasing, but it was only a feint, for we were too glad to get away from them to be in earnest. In 10 minutes after we tacked the last time, we ceased firing, having thrown some 8 or 10 round shot after the proas, and were close-hauled again, heading to the southwest. The end. Ha! Okay, that one was good. That one I liked very much. That is the best one we've had so far.